Hello everyone, welcome back to JAS Reviews. My name is James and welcome to the second episode of the Critical Corner for the year 2022. And today I am going to be talking about all movies in shorter form, which is what the Critical Corner is intended to do. Either talk about all music or all movies in shorter form. And today I'm going to be talking about a selection of 4 different movies I've seen over the past couple of months. I do have some catching up to do, but I feel like these are the 4 biggest movies I saw over the past couple of months, so these are the ones that I wanted to talk about the most. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the first movie I'm going to be talking about. The first movie I'm going to be talking about is one I saw most recently, and that is On The Nile. This is a sort of sequel, not sequel, to Murder on the Orient Express. I call it a sequel because it comes from the same series of Agatha Christie novels about the detective Hercule Poirot, which is, interestingly, the best-selling book series out there aside from the Bible and one other thing that I can't remember. But these are the best-selling, in general, book series out there because of how many there are of them. So Kenneth Branagh has a lot of good material on his hand if he wants to continue making these. This is generally a very crowd-pleasing-esque movie in every way. It's going to please most audiences. For movie lovers, they will love seeing all these recognizable actors on screen. For mystery lovers, they will love the mystery. And I think, in general, it's just a solid movie. It's a very fun one with an easy-to-follow plot, and it can leave you guessing on certain things. Although for me, I actually did generally guess the twist, or the mystery revealed of this plot pretty early on, and I don't know if everybody else did that, but this one seemed like a bit of an easier to figure out mystery than Murder on the Orient Express in my opinion, but that doesn't make the movie bad. The most interesting thing about this movie to point out is that it actually gives a little bit more characterization to Hercule Poirot than I was expecting. I don't know how much of this was included in the book, but we do get some backstory on Hercule as a person, and weirdly enough, we get some backstory on how he got his big mustache. Now, I know for a fact that that was not included in the book, because I looked that up. It was just a little bit of a weird choice, that aspect, but I did like learning about how he had a past where he was in love with someone and lost that person that he loved. And that actually does a very good job of populating the main themes of this movie, which is the idea of the lengths we will go to for the people that we love. And I like how every character in the movie, to some degree, the main characters at least, have that aspect to them of what they love. They will do almost anything for that person. I think that makes this movie a lot more thematically solid than Murder on the Orient Express. Visually, like I said, this movie is very arresting. Now, I will say, like Murder on the Orient Express, the visuals are almost too dazzling in ways to where things look almost uncomfortably too good and almost unrealistic. And I'm sure there was some CGI used in this for sure, although it wasn't as obvious as in Murder on the Orient Express in my opinion. And while that is sort of something that is noticeable, I also did think the movie did look legitimately beautiful and it's very nice to look at, and I think the setting here was pretty interesting. On a boat on the Nile, it's pretty interesting to watch the movie from that location. Performances across the board are pretty good. I wouldn't say anybody here is knockout incredible, except for maybe Kenneth Branagh as Hercule Poirot. Whereas I feel like he was a little bit too cartoonish in Murder on the Orient Express. I think it was helpful that he was giving his character a little bit more humanity in this one and making him more than just the very eccentric detective type. Now we have some more that we know about him, and I think that makes him a more interesting character here. Also, I know a lot of people have said that they did not care for Gal Gadot's performance as Lynette, but I actually liked her well enough here. I think she was very sympathetic, and I enjoyed following her as well. The real highlight here for me was Emma Mackey as Jacqueline de Belfort. She was superb in this movie. I really like her in Sex Education, and I think she really disappears into this role that she's playing here. She plays a character who is very intriguing and who has a lot of layers to her, and I really appreciated her performance for that. Also, Russell Brand did a really surprisingly good job here, even though he wasn't on screen very much. I appreciated how he dedicated to disappearing into his role too. He was almost unrecognizable here, and I liked what he did with his character. Overall, this movie isn't like the most amazing thing out there. It has a solid enough mystery and a solid enough cast, and I think it works well enough. I will say that for the first 20-30 minutes, probably 20 at least, the movie wasn't super engaging to me, but when the plot does get rolling, you are actually pretty interested in what the movie has going on, but it takes a while to get there. So overall, solid movie. I think it was better than Murder on the Orient Express, and I will continue to check these out as long as Kenneth Branagh continues to release them. 3.5 out of 5 stars for me. Next up is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is following in line with movies like Halloween 2018 and sort of being a sequel to the original movie and sort of a remake, but sort of not. And I'm just sort of tired of these remakes slash requels at this point, as a Scream movie dubs them, which I will be talking about shortly. I don't really care for these movies when they are especially this bad in quality. I was, of course, open to a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, but it feels like it's trying to take too much from 2018 Halloween when Texas Chainsaw Massacre is very much so its own entity. To me, Leatherface in this movie acts a lot like Michael Myers, and that is not who Leatherface is as a horror villain, in my opinion. He's a lot different from Michael. He's much more reckless, much more vicious, I feel like, and not as calculated as Michael Myers is. And yet he acts like him in this, which is just sort of an insult to his character, I feel like. And honestly, the worst thing about this movie is that I cannot stand the characters. Any of them. Except for maybe Elsie Fisher's character. But honestly, I feel like that's more of a credit to Elsie Fisher's acting than anything else. She's the only actor in this movie, in my opinion, that goes away unscathed. But these 4 main characters are not very likable as these influencers who are essentially gentrifying this neighborhood for their own gains. And I think they're supposed to be unlikable in some ways, but they're not even unlikable in an enjoyable way. The one positive I would have to say about this movie is that I think the first kill with Leatherface was actually pretty cool and pretty brutal. I think it was pretty fun, but all the stuff after that was just not all that interesting, and honestly, there were some points that were just huge head scratchers. This is a spoiler. I am going to go into spoiler territory, so if you do not care for that, then go ahead and skip over this part. But Sally Hardesty comes back in this movie, who was the main character in the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they basically treat her like Laurie Strode, which is once again, a very weird choice because Sally is nothing like Laurie, and she doesn't have to be. She is also a very underwhelming cameo in here. She is not treated at all respectfully like Laurie was in the 2018 Halloween. She essentially does nothing. She comes to face Leatherface, who she claims she's been waiting to face for forever, when there was never really much of a connection between Sally and Leatherface in the first place. And then she dies off very underwhelmingly, and it's very silly. The incorporation of social media into here is very painful. There's some very cheesy lines because of it, like where one person legitimately says to Leatherface, "You're canceled." And it's meant to be this bleak satire moment, but it's not very funny at all, and it just made me roll my eyes. And then the ending is just very predictable. It ends off in the way that you were expecting it to, and it just left me shrugging my shoulders, just wondering what the point of this movie was beyond a cash grab. And that's the answer there. It is once again a cash grab. Much like Halloween Kills, in my opinion, where these things did not need to exist. There's plenty of original horror that we can enjoy out there, but unfortunately, the fact is, movies like these that have a recognizable face behind them will continue to make money as long as we allow them, and I know I'm part of that problem. So, I can't really say much or complain much when I am contributing to the problem, but at the same time, we should continue to pay attention to original horror movies as well, which I also try to do. And for that reason, I'm going to give this one a 1.5 out of 5 stars. Did not like this one at all. It's pretty much on the level of Halloween Kills with me in terms of ruining, or in my opinion, not doing very well with iconic horror people. Just not great. Next up is a movie that was released for streaming on HBO Max, and I believe may have been in theaters, but I am not for sure on that, and that is The Fallout. This movie is one that I've been wanting to talk about because it is definitely one of my favorite movies of the year so far. It stars Jenna Ortega and Maddie Ziegler in it, and both of them are excellent. I will talk about Jenna Ortega again when I talk about Scream for my next movie, but in my opinion, this movie really shows her as an excellent breakout star who I am going to be having my eyes on this year. She plays a character in this who is navigating the aftermath of a very traumatic school shooting, and she essentially navigates this aftermath through the person she experienced the school shooting with, Mia, played by Maddie Ziegler. The two of them together, along with Quentin, played by Nias Fitch, sort of try to navigate through their feelings on the school shooting and what it has done to them. And I think for that reason, it is a very powerful and very relevant movie. This movie does a great job also, very importantly, in not overdoing the violence or overshowing things in regards to the school shooting. In fact, we don't ever see the shooter. All we see is these three characters reacting to it. And it doesn't ever get too exploitative in that regard, I think. I think that this is a movie that you can actually show to teenagers and it can actually resonate with them. The director of this movie, Megan Park, I think does a great job at understanding teenagers, who they are as people. This movie feels very authentic in that regard. I feel like it actually uses the language that Generation Z would use. As a teacher myself, I feel like I am fairly familiar with the language that Generation Z uses, and I think this movie does a good job at making that feel authentic and actually understanding how social media works with teenagers as well, without making it feel corporate or like the director is out of the loop. And also, I think she gets great performances out of all of her young actors. Jenna Ortega knocks her performance out of the park here. She is superb. I think she does a really good job of disappearing into this character and making her feel authentic and consistently sympathetic. And Maddie Ziegler gets to redeem herself after a very disastrous performance in music that was not her fault. It was more Sia's fault. But she gets to redeem herself here and play a character that I really enjoyed following along with and I thought was pretty intriguing. And Niles Fitch, who I really enjoy in the TV show This Is Us, shows himself to continue to be a great younger actor that I think should be in a lot more and deserves a lot more recognition. This movie, all in all, is excellent, and I think it does a great job at embodying and talking about human relationships and how we relate to each other when we're going through trauma. This is shown most primarily with the relationship between main character Veda and her sister Amelia, played excellently by Lumi Pollock. These are some of my favorite scenes of the year so far. The relationship between these sisters is very touching and very heartwarming, and I loved where the relationship ended at. The one issue I would say with this movie, which really isn't the hugest, is that I feel like its ending is a little too bleak for the message it's going for. I understand what the director was going for with the ending, but at the same time, it really makes everything feel a little too hopeless, in my opinion. But like I said, I understand why. That's more of a personal gripe of mine than anything else. Still, at the end of the day, this is a really good movie that I think stays engaging throughout, and I think does a really good job at talking about its issues with a very delicate touch. Strong 4 out of 5 stars for me. Has a good chance of being one of my favorite movies of the year, honestly, and I wasn't expecting this one to hit me as hard as it did, but it really did. And finally, we end off with the latest Scream movie, which is just called Scream in name, but might as well be called Scream 5, because it is pretty much a continuation of where the other movies have been, with some new characters and some old ones. And you would think, with how I talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that I wouldn't enjoy this movie, because it is once again taking an iconic horror icon and putting them in a sort of remake, sort of not remake. But the case is, the Scream movies, the Scream sequels, have always been a lot better, and I think that's because they've consistently had good people in the background working on them, and they've also done a good job at staying faithful to who the character of Ghostface is. And this movie, once again, does that. Of course, it is not as good as the iconic original. I think it would be hard for a lot of horror movies to match up to the original, because if you saw my top 10 horror movies last year, then you will know that one of my favorite horror movies of all time is the original Scream, and that still remains to be true. But I think this movie is fun enough that it works. And as always with the Scream movies, they have some sort of meta commentary on horror, and this one has meta commentary on the idea of requels, is what they call it. The idea of movies coming out, horror movies coming out, and having the people in it, especially the iconic horror characters, but they're almost just spiritual successors to the original movie while also trying to incorporate new things into them. And that, of course, is very meta because Scream itself is a requel. And it is, of course, commenting on other movies like Halloween or even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that came out this year. And I think its commentary works well. I like that it has a lot of fun with it. I don't think it's as darkly comedic as the original Scream was, but I do think it works well, and I think it is a very relevant topic to talk about right now. I think the cold opening of this movie is really good. It, of course, is a direct tribute to the original Scream, and Jenna Ortega is the victim here, which makes it all the better. She's really good in here, too. She's probably my favorite aspect of this movie. I really liked her performance, and I think she's solid. And I think it was an interesting twist to have her not die in the beginning, which sort of upends our expectations. And of course, we have other characters connected to characters from the original Scream, like our main character, Sam Carpenter, is connected to the original killer, one of the two original killers from the Scream movie, which is an interesting aspect to her otherwise, unfortunately, very uninteresting main character. And I appreciate, of course, the addition of the original three main characters from the other Scream movies, Cindy Prescott, Gale Weathers, and Dewey Riley. And I think all of them get their justifiably due amount of screen time, and I enjoyed following them as well. Other great performances include Jack Quaid as Richie Kirsch, who is Sam's boyfriend, and I really enjoy him in The Boys, and he does a great job here. I really love what they do with his character, and I think Dylan Minnette was solid enough as Wes Hicks. Also, Jasmine Savoy Brown as Mindy Meeks Martin was good here too, and I can't wait to say her and other things as well. Now, is this the scariest Scream movie? No, in fact, this isn't one of the scarier movies I've seen in recent memory. I feel like it leans more on the thriller angle than anything else, and that can make it a little dull in places, but there's also some really fun aspects to this movie too, and I couldn't deny that I had a fun time with it. So overall, I'm going to give this new Scream movie solid 3.5 out of 5 stars. So yeah, that ends this episode of The Critical Corner. What were your thoughts on any of the movies I talked about? Let me know in the comments down below. Once again, my name is James, and until then, I will see you all in the next video.